Great, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. And I think we wanted to give a shout out to Ballroom E at the Venetian. Hello, everybody. I'm Hillary Ashton. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at, well, not here, at Teradata. And it's really great to see everybody here. And let Russ introduce himself.
Good to see you all. Thanks for coming out. I'm Russell Scabetti. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Business Intelligence for the New York Giants. Really appreciate the opportunity to come out here to reInvent and get to co-present with some of the fun things we're doing with Teradata.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. We are going to jump into some slides here, and we're going to tag team a little bit. So we've got an action-packed agenda, and we're hoping to save a little bit of time for any questions that you all might have. So as we're going through, if you have questions, feel free to ask us at the end here. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the really big challenges that are impacting CX, or customer experience. And I think you've probably seen throughout the event here at reInvent that the complexity and growth of data is vast, and it's impacting CX as well. And that's really led to some need to do hyper-personalization, leverage all of that data, and really understand the customer journey. And Russ is actually going to do a great job of talking about some of the amazing journeys that he's been able to understand from the Giants' perspective. And we see this as an evolving sort of challenge with some of the Gen AI work and some of the privacy around customer data and the sensitivity around that. So those are just some of the trends that we're seeing in the customer experience landscape. And some of those biggest challenges are really around those data silos. You talk about multi-channel, and that usually means multi-siloed data, and really understanding how to take advantage and harness the power of advanced analytics when, in fact, some of that data isn't maybe exactly where you want it to start with. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the progression that we see in customer experience, and Russ is going to talk a little bit about the progression that the Giants has made, going from that traditional kind of product-focused, I'm trying to sell you one thing and then I'm going to try to sell you another thing, to a more journey-oriented, hyper-personalized, segment of one approach to customer experience. And so this individual focus, this kind of effortless experience for customers that's in channel, it's timely, it's highly relevant, and it's really based on meeting the customer where they are in the moment. And so with all of that kind of as a little bit of background, let me go ahead and turn it over to Russ to talk about how he's making this really happen.
Thank you. So before we get into the actual specifics, let me give you a little bit of backstory. So I've been with the Giants for about 4 years now, and really had the opportunity to build out our overall business data and analytics strategy from nothing. And so we're really excited about where we are today. We've accomplished a lot over the last 4 years, even got recognized by Sports Business Journal last year as being what they call a power player when it comes to technology and sports. This evolution is happening not just on the business side. My colleagues on the football side are just as invested in terms of building out those capabilities. Fortunately, I can't speak to the details of what happens on the field or in the draft room. I mostly stay over here on the business side. But you can see a little bit of some of those best-in-class technologies and tech stack elements that we've brought together. So we've brought together Sales Cloud and Marketing Cloud, Core, which is a sports-specific platform, AWS, Redshift, Tableau, Teradata, sales enablement tools like Sponsor United, brand measurement tools, something called Live Analytics, which is specific to sports, to understanding fan behavior, fan demographics. We've brought this whole ecosystem together to really become that data-driven organization. Even though we've done this over the course of 4 years, it definitely did not happen overnight. The real impetus to get this going started about 5 months before I joined the Giants. So I report up to our Chief Business Officer. His name's Pete Gwelly. He came to the organization in 2019, the reason why he came to the organization was we had this amazing opportunity to take the New York Football Giants, this nearly 100-year-old brand that has history of success on the field, multiple championships, multiple Super Bowls, and still take it further, right? How do we modernize the business? What he was calling Giants 2.0, right? So leveraging all of this brand equity that we have, this amazing fan base, this TV ratings, but really modernize, become a digital organization, be digital first, grow our social and digital channels, be data-driven, right? When it comes to everything from pricing decisions to measuring partnerships to understanding our fans, leveraging that data first element. Being growth focused. Don't just settle for the fact that we've been successful. So shoot high, shoot for being top 3, top 5 across the league in all of these major categories. And the way you do that is by being customer centric. Don't just rely on TV ratings, don't just rely on the power of the brand, but really build that one-to-one relationship, that segment of one, understanding these fans, building that communication channel with all of them. And we have so many different ways that we do that today. We do look at ourselves as a direct-to-consumer business, the same ways the Netflixes of the world, the Amazons of the world do. We have so many ways that we can have this communication with our fans, with millions of them. Fans that are local, that are coming to the game, that's great. We'll engage them on game day, and they'll have the best experience possible. But what about the millions of fans that don't get to come to the game? We're engaging them through social, through our podcast network, through our newsletter, through our connected TV apps, engaging through retail and e-commerce. Right? We're sort of essentially a business of many little micro businesses in order to serve all of the fans of the New York Giants. And because of that, because of the scale that we do operate on, we get tremendous insights back about all these different audiences. So flipping it around to be fan-centric, we have all this great information. I love the gentleman's hat. It's kind of hard to read. It says, once a Giant, always a Giant. That's kind of our mantra. All of our players, they always, when they retire, they always love to say, once a Giant, always a Giant. And our fans feel that same way too. We are a generational fan base, so we've had this opportunity, this wealth of information that we've been able to collect on our fans over a long period of time, and we've really escalated that. So, there's kind of the traditional things that you would expect from ticketing and attendance and concessions, but a lot of information on demographics, a lot of information coming from our digital channels, from email, from SMS, from mobile. We are very active when it comes to surveying. There's a whole league survey platform called the Voice of the Fan. That's really important for us to understand our fan base. And then the league data overall is really cool. Over the last couple of years, the league rolled out a one-to-one fan engagement platform where all clubs in the league collaborate around understanding and sharing information about the fan. So things that maybe I wouldn't have had visibility to in the past, people that are NFL Plus subscribers or playing NFL Fantasy or engaging with the league through other means, now I have a much wider view of that overall fan data ecosystem. The results so far have been really strong. Just a few numbers to throw out there. We actually just hit 10 million total followers across our major social media channels. So we have this incredibly engaged, large social audience that spans the world. Growth in our connected TV app, growth across all of our owned and operated digital platforms, on our website, in our app. Our email database is actually knocking on the door of 1 million active subscribers. And that's just people that are active subscribers. Our overall universe in our CDP is much larger than that. And our podcast network exceeded over 7 million downloads this year. Combine that with our traditional media partners on television and radio. We have quite the direct-to-consumer universe that we've been able to put together since Pete joined the organization. And again, that effort to modernize the business. So that's a quick summary of some of the key benchmarks that we've hit on the business side. But how we support that, let's drill down a level further and talk about the journey that we went through specifically in the analytics and BI side of things. So I'm calling this our giant journey, if you will. So we have 3 main phases that we have progressed through, the third phase of which is kind of where we're living today. Phase 1 was about operational platforms. Again, I came into the organization. There's a lot of white space, if you will, in terms of figuring out what we want to do to modernize the business. As much as I want all the great bells and whistles and fun tools to support my analysts and my analytic goals, I needed to start outside in. That's almost always my strategy, is to start outside in. Because we still have to service the customer. Customer first, and the customer systems are outside. That's our CRM platform, that's our marketing email platform, that's supporting them with sales enablement and customer service tools. So over the first 12 months, that was absolutely our focus, is in terms of improving those systems. And it also helped us gain a lot of traction with our staff across all those different departments. They knew that we weren't just focused on data for data's sake. We were focused on data to support their goals and make them successful. So that was really key in terms of the overall adoption we've had over the last couple of years. Brief pause for COVID. That wasn't part of the phase 3 plan, but we adapt and we figure out and we move on. But eventually COVID settled out and we focused on phase 2, which was internal on infrastructure. Getting our warehouse, getting our CDP up and growing, getting our true consolidated identity management in place across all of those different data feeds, getting our systems in the cloud rather than relying on some of our on-premise databases that were our kind of patchwork solution as we first launched. Knowing that, now we can get into phase 3. Phase 3 is once we're comfortable with that infrastructure, how do we get better? Where do we want to take this? We're not just content to sit back and say, yes, we've got a view of the fan, we've got all of our systems plugged together. We know there's a lot more that we can do on the analytical side. So how do we scale? How do we focus on speed, insights? How do we get predictive rather than just descriptive with everything that we're doing? So at the end of the day, all those phases are about supporting all the elements of the organization. If I had to boil everything we do on the BI side down into 3 thematic buckets, bucket 1, and the one that we're focused on mostly today, is fan engagement. Without engagement, nothing else happens. Without fans in the building, without fans on social, without fans talking to us and watching us on TV, listening to us on radio, none of the data matters. So everything is going to be first and foremost about fan engagement. But secondly is going to be about our partners. We have a wonderful ecosystem of partners that we work with that rely on that fan engagement, that rely on the size of our audience, the power of our market, the power of the brand, and the power that we can do to help our partners communicate to Giants fans. So how do we value that? How do we measure and activate against that? And then what I call revenue forecasting, continuing to grow the business. That could be pricing, pacing, all the day-to-day operational decisions that we need to do to make sure we're still monetizing everything that we can monetize. And I like to do this in a way that empowers all of these different departments. The data just doesn't live with the BI group. The data lives with everyone. Everyone has access to our Tableau dashboards. Everyone has access to the leads. Well, let me rephrase that. Everyone who needs access to those systems has access to them. The sales team has visibility in terms of the detailed information they can to really personalize their conversations with our fans. The partnership team has access to all of our social valuation data so they can answer questions whenever our partners are asking about impressions, about engagement, about brand lift. Right? I fully believe that we need to make this access as wide as possible and continue to drive adoption. Now, we're at reInvent. If I don't put an architecture screen on the slide, I don't get invited back next year. So we got to at least talk a little bit about underlying infrastructure. It is an oversimplification, but I think it tells the story and it gives you, again, some of the idea of what we've built so far and also talks about how Teradata comes in and helps support that ecosystem as well. On the left, like I said, we've got that variety of sources. We work with companies like Zoomf and Conviva that help us really collect a lot of great social information, Adobe for all of our web traffic, Salesforce for our CRM and our marketing cloud. We're a Fanatics partner. A lot of NFL teams work with Fanatics, so you go online to giantshop.com and you buy that Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley jersey. We're getting information about that we can use to help understand you. Heck, maybe last week you went and bought a Tommy DeVito jersey, in which case, thank you. That's great. We love what he's doing. By the way, Giants fans in the room? Yes, one, come on. Excellent. Any Eagles or Cowboys fans in the room? Yeah. Doors that way. Doors that way. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You need to have them, otherwise you don't get to play the games. So it's all good. These last two down here on the bottom are really important. That's Ticketmaster and that's the NFL. Those are incredibly important feeds for us, tons of great information that we're collecting. All of that flows into our managed service provider. We work with AWS and a particular partner called Core. That's where we do all of our identity management, consolidate everything into our warehouse, consolidate everything into our CDP. We do have one remaining legacy system on premise in our SQL environment that we do plug into that as well. It comes up through Amazon S3. Downstream, of course, depending on the end users, we have Tableau and Python for my team. All of our sales and service staff live in Salesforce, so we can expose information to our staff. And then, of course, we've been able to add Teradata to the ecosystem, particularly when it came to wanting to enhance our analytical capabilities, which I'm going to touch on a little bit. But first, I want to let Hillary talk a little bit about Teradata Vantage.
Awesome, thanks. When Russ was talking about the complexities of trying to pull all of that data together and then really start to do amazing analytic things with that data in service to the business, Vantage Cloud Lake, the architecture is really built for that. And it has our best-in-class analytic capabilities. In fact, one of the large analysts recently told us that we have 5 times as many analytic capabilities as the closest competitor. And those analytic capabilities really lead directly to value for our customers. And so the architecture is a cloud-native architecture, a full separation of compute and storage, leveraging S3 as the primary storage, the ability to scale up and and scale down depending on what your needs are, and have independent compute clusters, which we think really gives our customers the ability to take all of the amazing capabilities of Teradata, but scale it up and down as you need to. So if you've got maybe a Super Bowl that you're preparing for and you got to do a lot of analytics, you can scale that thing up, and then after that ends and you guys win, then you can go and shut that thing down and maybe take a little vacation.
I like it. Can we put that into the next contract?
Okay, in the next contract where you win.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
I'm on it,
like
I'm on it. And so the power behind not just the architecture, but the analytic capabilities is something that Russ is gonna bring to life in just a few minutes. But if we look at what ClearScape Analytics, which is our analytics set of capabilities that sits within Vantage Cloud Lake, there's some really interesting capabilities there. And I'm a total nerd when it comes to analytics, but we have over 140 built-in analytic capabilities, which means that you're not moving data all over the place. You can use those analytic capabilities directly within Teradata Vantage. And those are things like k-means or clustering. Those are things like NPath analysis to try to understand a customer journey. Those are things like propensity and trying to understand what that next best offer or next best action should look like. So those are all built in, but we've extended our portfolio to really be open and connected. So if you're using Python, if you're using SQL, if you're using SAS, you can use that directly within Teradata Vantage. If you want to use Jupyter Notebooks, if you want to use other partner tools, you can do that directly within Teradata Vantage. And then we are directly integrated with AWS services natively, and that extends the capabilities of our Vantage Cloud Lake offer. So we're really excited about that. Let me turn it back over to Russ to talk a little bit about how he brought all of that incredible capability to life.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the analytics is the main area. This is a great transition point because what she was describing, those built-in capabilities, as well as the ability to support ways we were already operating. We had already been working in R and working in Python and really wanted one cohesive analytical ecosystem that we can use to not just make better models, but make them more real-time, make them more actionable, and in a way that kind of lined up with the investments we'd already made in the rest of that managed infrastructure. So yeah, and as much as the Giants are a huge brand, one of the most valuable franchises in the world, we're not a huge staff. Most sports teams are not huge staffs, right? So I have a team of about 5. So when I want to provide next level analytical capabilities, I can't just go out and hire a team of data scientists and build out an entirely brand new infrastructure, right? I need to figure out ways to do it efficiently with the resources we have, complemented by the resources of our key partners, in order to still hit those big goals. Our goals haven't changed. We just need to figure out creative ways to do that. We want things to be live, refreshing real time, talking to our existing ecosystem, leveraging that consolidated fan identity that we had worked to put together. And so in collaboration with Teradata, especially talking to folks like Dustin, who understood the sports space, understood what it was like to manage the business analytics infrastructure, we had a very clear vision on how complementary this platform would be, and immediately identified several projects that were on my wish list that we know we would be able to tackle that previously would have been more challenging without the added capabilities. So we're going to go through a couple of them. We're going to go through some of the clustering examples, some of our fan journey examples, as well as things around revenue and demand curves that I'm really excited about, and we're still just at the starting point of where we're going to get on some of these areas. So let's start with clustering. Let's start with the k-means. We have lots of different Giants fans in the world. I think we have somewhere between 6 and 8 million fans in our overall ecosystem, depending on whether I'm using Golden Record ID, whether I'm using email address. But we have a large audience at our fingertips, and not every Giants fan is the same. Like I mentioned, we're very generational, so we span the folks that have been coming to Giants games for 50, 60 years, as well as the fan that just discovered football last week and we're their local team. So we need to understand that we need to not just oversimplify things based on demographics or transactions. We need to get smarter. The league has been a big believer in cluster modeling in their overall data strategy, but they're doing it from the league level. Nothing wrong with that, but they have a different goal. The league has built out 7 or 8 different clusters to understand more of a ticket-centric fan versus a gamer fan versus more of a television fan, a premium fan. They have built out their audiences, and we can use that. It's great insight, but still, not every Giants fan is going to magically fit into one of those clusters. So what do? We want to figure out our version of that. And so we actually broke it down into 2 main types of audiences. We wanted to dive deep into our season ticket members. They are our lifeblood. They are very important. They are incredibly loyal. They come back every year. We want to really understand them as a special audience. And then let's look at the rest of the universe as well, both ticket buying and non-ticket buying clusters. So let's start with our season ticket member audiences. Lots of different inputs available to us. We tested tons of different iterations and combinations of different variables. Primarily, it focused on what their primary and secondary ticketing spend was, their attendance patterns over the last 2 to 3 years, key demographics around age and income, their fanatics information, their e-commerce purchase patterns, as well as some of their digital patterns around email opens and clicks, web data, which could be web traffic, or also could be web entries. We do tons of enter to win contests and sweepstakes and other things that we can collect and get people to participate through Giants.com and other digital channels. So put those in together, working with Teradata, building out our k-means clusters. We essentially identified 3 distinct segments that we can now engage differently. And whenever you do a cluster model, you always got to come up with cute names. It's a requisite. If you don't do it, the model doesn't count. So we call them our premium experience audience, our traditional diehards, and our on-the-rise fans. Premium experience, pretty self-explanatory. It might be our smallest group, but they're the high spenders, right? They're the people that want the best. They want to sit in the coaches club. They want to sit in our mezz club. They want to sit in the suite. They're active on the secondary market. They're probably buying additional tickets to bring their friends and family. They spend on fanatics, gifting Giants merch at the holidays. So highest household income, a lot of email activity, but not so much on the web, which makes sense. These aren't folks that don't need to enter to win items. They're just going to buy what they want to rather than try to win it. We also have our traditional diehards. Spend is still fairly high, but not nearly as high as the premium experience. Slightly older, they're probably the folks that are the most tenured. They're the folks that are renewing their season tickets for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Moderate digital activity. And then, of course, our third group here on the rise. Their spend is lower, slightly younger, slightly lower income, higher digital engagement. This is an important audience for us. If I was going to be monitoring these audiences, that's the one that I'm hoping eventually works their way into one of those other 2 buckets. That might be the audience that I need to monitor when it comes to retention. Because if they've only been with us for a couple of years, they might be more prone to decide, this isn't necessarily what I expected. So that's an audience that we ultimately want to try to see move into one of those other 2 clusters, and then we continue to backfill with new season ticket members. But again, not everyone's a season ticket member. So on the non-season ticket member side, again, similar data, maybe not as much attendance, right? Because they're only maybe buying a couple of games a year, but we still have their ticket purchase, we still have their age and income. We actually started relying a lot more on the NFL source data for this, because they might have digital behavior that we wouldn't have visibility into that'll help us model out a wider audience of our fans. And so here we have a few more clusters. We kind of have 3 that are non-ticket related as well as 3 that are ticket related. First audience, disengaged. They're fans, but we just don't know enough about them yet. Right? We got to monitor them. We got to figure out what type of fan they're going to become. Maybe they're just a casual fan. We have our digital first fans. We're monitoring that audience all the time, and we're seeing engagement stay high regardless of what's happening with team performance. We've got our big shoppers. That they come back repeated times over the years in terms of fanatics, and they're very fanatics driven in terms of how they represent their fandom. And then the ticketing one is interesting. We call them our dabblers, our annual outings, and our top of the market. Now, these aren't season ticket members, but they all have very distinct combinations of buying and demographic patterns that the cluster model kind of brought to life. The dabblers, just very inconsistent. They might buy 1 game a year, skip 2 seasons. There doesn't have necessarily as much of a pattern to their purchase behavior versus those annual outings. That spend is much higher, and it's fairly predictable. And then the top of the market, they are the ones that are going to go buy the best seats that they can on the secondary market. They skew a little male, a little older. Some of the dabblers in annual outings skew a little more female, a little younger. I asked one of my analysts to kind of take a look at some of our trends this year in that audience, and so it actually really fits the pattern. Team performance is down a little bit this year, so what we're seeing maybe is the dabblers not coming out to as many games this year, but we're actually seeing the annual outings in the top of the markets are actually higher engaged this year. So nothing about their pattern changed. It doesn't matter if, what's happening on the field. Their patterns are still staying consistent. So we're going to use that information to decide how we want to engage those audiences. Who are we messaging, how often we're messaging them, what type of personalization we're going to be putting in front of those different audiences to understand what's going to resonate with them. So that was kind of what we did on the clustering side. Really impactful information, stuff that we're constantly monitoring, and stuff that we're just starting to get into now, how we can use Marketing Cloud and build dynamic personalized content blocks to put the right messaging in front of those audiences. But that was project number 1. We also really wanted to understand different elements when it came to the fan journey. So we started with more of a purchase attendance journey. That's where we have the most information. We have a lot of other, like I said, you see we have plenty of other sources, but we wanted to really dive deep first here on things related to purchase and attendance. That's going to be the most actionable for us on a day-to-day basis. So what games are they buying? What are they most likely to buy next? How often do they buy? How far in advance do they buy? Looking at both primary and secondary purchases, our building is majority sold out on a season ticket basis, so we have to very closely monitor the secondary market. It's a key source of information for us if we might become future season ticket members. So those are the key points in the journey, and we focus on a kind of a time series analysis, looking at timing of sales per day leading up to games, time between purchases, how much time after attendance before they hit their next purchase, and particularly emphasis on the most likely game to purchase. This is our version of almost like a product recommendation. What's the most next likely game someone is going to decide to buy a ticket for? Now, I know you can't actually read this chart, but it's here for impact purposes. We dove into the patterns on game purchase and game attendance. And we could not believe what we were seeing. We assume there's some variability in terms of how, like, some people come to one game, 2 games. People are going to tend to more come to the rivalry games, the Dallas game, the Philadelphia game. But when we looked, there were over 8,000 different combinations of purchase and attendance patterns from one season. We only have 10 games. This isn't baseball with 81 home games a year. We have 10 games, 8 or 9 regular season, 1 or 2 preseason. So to have that many different combinations of purchase attendance patterns from game to game was shocking. I did not expect that. But what do we do with that? That alone isn't necessarily actionable, but what is actionable is looking at percentages and patterns within that. And so one that was particularly important for us was this idea, again, of what's the next likely game someone is to purchase. There's a common strategy in sports where in this current game, the next thing you should promote is the next game, especially in football. We have a game this Sunday and a game next Sunday. So if you decided to come to the game this Sunday, I want to message you and tell you to come back next Sunday. The interesting thing we discovered is that is probably one of the least likely patterns for a single game purchase. You're actually 6 times more likely to skip the next game if you are a multi-game purchaser. That was very interesting for us, and that's something I can immediately decide to take action on. I'm going to look at when you purchased, and maybe look at the elements of that game. Look more at the elements of the opponent. Was it an afternoon game or an evening game? What happened? Did we win or lose? And look at games further out and get them to plan ahead. Maybe I'm going to promote the game that's 4 to 6 weeks away, because that's the one that's actually going to line up more likely for that person's next most likely game to purchase. And then this one I'm particularly excited about too. This one is around demand curves, right? Those all, I think everyone sees, seen demand curves before. Willingness to pay, is the higher the ticket price, the lower the volume, the lower the ticket price, the higher the volume. This is looking at demand curves over the last 3 seasons. We are always trying to figure out what are the different elements that we can do to go into our pricing strategy. And pricing for us is not just what's the price for this game. We have a stadium of 82,500 seats. In that stadium, we've got 50 different price levels, so we've got lots of ways we can change prices. We have our season ticket prices, and even within our season tickets, the price that we put on the games within the season ticket will vary game to game, because that also tends to set what the market price would be, at least the starting market price for that particular game when you get into single game revenue. So we have an entirely different strategy when we are pricing and rolling out our season ticket information than once we get into the season and start getting into individual pricing changes. And we are a full adopter of dynamic ticket pricing, like every other professional sports team. You go to buy a ticket today, 2 weeks from now you go to buy the same ticket, it might be a different price. It's going to depend on a variety of factors. It's going to depend on the volume that's on the secondary market, team performance, overall demand for that ticket. Those prices are going to change, day to day, week to week. So we really wanted to think about pricing a number of different ways. And so we started with trying to understand the fundamental demand curves for different games and different types of inventory. So we built these curves out, and we worked really closely with Bobby and Aaron. I know they're not here, unfortunately, but from the Teradata team on the data science here, along with my analyst, Pat, who's been very involved in these projects. So they worked together and built out these curves and essentially use, again, k-means clustering to combine and figure out what games look most alike. But what we realized that wasn't enough. And this is where I get excited. We can't just look at a game as a single product and be done. We almost have to look at it as 2 or 3 different products. What did that product look like before we ever took the field? Last year, I think we exceeded a lot of people's expectations. This year, unfortunately, we haven't had as much success on the field. But you don't know what's going to happen, right? So in this case, what the demand curve looks like from April through August or September is going to dictate one set of decisions, and what that demand curve shifts to, depending on what the team is doing, is going to be entirely different. So we're looking at not just the clustering of the games overall, but the clustering of the games early in the year, clustering of the games later in the year, and I'm trying to identify which of those, what elements of those games make them more or less likely to be vulnerable to shift in patterns. We've seen later in the season is much more vulnerable to shifting up and shifting down. So we need to be smarter about looking at games that are happening in December and January, because they're much more likely to change clusters versus games in September or games versus certain opponents. So we can be a lot smarter about this, because we have to. Dynamic pricing, I mean, just like the airline industry, dynamic pricing, where we need to be able to respond to the market and make those types of changes. However, unfortunately, unlike the airline industry, airline industry, their dynamic pricing, they're always going to have Christmas, they're always going to have Easter. For us, it'd be like the airline industry, except one year all of a sudden everyone decides they don't like Santa, and no one cares about Christmas, right? We don't have necessarily the predictability that they have, even though we fundamentally use the same tactics when it comes to ticket pricing. So these are just a few of the projects that we've really kind of hit on over the last, I'd say, really this year. This year has really been the deep dive into a lot of these key areas. There's still a lot more to go. Pricing optimization is kind of the next one on the list. It's a natural transition point to some of the work that we were doing in terms of building out these different demand curves, right? How do we then make those specific pricing decisions? Looking at percentages above and below, face value, looking at trends, how the prices are going up and down day to day, week to week, so we can really be smarter about making those different types of individualized pricing decisions. And then also when it comes the expansion of the fan journey. The journey I showed you a couple slides ago was really about buying a ticket and attending a game. But we know there's a lot more. When you think about, we like to think about the driveway to driveway experience. If you're really going to talk about customer journey, customer experience, it starts, at least on game day, it starts when you get in the car or you decide to go to the game. The truth is, it actually starts probably 2, 3, 4 months earlier. When did you think about buying tickets? When did that idea first cross your mind? How early can we actually think that that fan has entered that flow of the journey? So digital engagement, maybe they're making e-commerce purchases, getting the jersey that they're going to wear to the game, decide to actually come to the game, attend, when do they come? We have a whole deep dive analysis when it comes to looking at patterns on when someone decides to enter a particular gate, right? People love tailgating in our buildings, right? So, but at the same time, we need to operationalize something as simple as ingress, because if you have 80,000 people that all try to enter the same 5 gates, the same 10-minute period before kickoff, that's pretty hard to operate on. So are there patterns in the fan journey where certain people are more likely to come in early, or can we create incentives for people to enter the games early? What activations are they engaging with? Can we collect information and use that? How are they leaving the game? What's the transit experience like? What's their post-event experience like? We started dabbling in this most recently. One of the first takeaways we saw was around the digital data combining with ticket purchase. We saw a pattern where some people are most likely to purchase after one web engagement, like one web form submission, and then it drops. And then if they weren't going to purchase after one, it doesn't get back to that same level until after they've submitted 3 or 4, right? So there's some people that immediately get right to a purchase trigger, and other people that take more time to nurture. Can we be better at identifying the differences in those audiences, so that way we can put the purchase message in front of that person after that first engagement, but not in front of the person who needs a little more time? So that's where we're going to dig into now on the journey side, is really expanding it to a much wider set of information. What's the common thread in all this? Mentioned on the very first slide, how we personalize the fan experience. It is the most important thing. Without the fans, without the engagement, without their attendance, their viewership, their following on digital, not everything else doesn't matter. You don't want to put on the games if the fans aren't there to enjoy it. The COVID season was challenging. Like, we weren't able to have fans in the building. That was a very unique season for us compared to maybe some other sports that at least we will have some fans in the building. The fans are first and foremost. So who are the fans? How do we continue to improve our consolidated identity and understanding? How do we continue to improve our clusters? What are they going to buy? What's the right price? What's the right product mix for every fan? And that's going to be very different. When they're going to buy, continuing to dive deeper into that fan journey. Where are they going to participate? There's plenty of fans that are just never going to be able to attend the Giants game, but we still want to engage them where they live and the channels they exist in. Why they're buying, the psychographics, right? The cluster attributes start to tell us the story. Like we saw the dabblers, we saw the top of the market, we saw the shoppers. Like we're starting to put together the psychographic profile that goes along with those behaviors inside those different clusters. But there's more we know that we can do there. And then, of course, personalizing the experience, personalizing the messages, whether it's through email, whether it's through social, whether it's through SMS. That's a channel we're particularly excited about as well. We know there's a lot more that we can do, and because we've got big goals. Phase 3 for us has just started. There's a lot more growth ahead of us that we want to get to. And so I have to bring it back to Teradata as well, because these projects, all the items that I went through, none of those would have been possible without the work we've done together over the last several months. For us, it really checked a lot of key boxes, which is why we brought it into our ecosystem. We knew we wanted to expand when it came to our analytical capabilities. We need to do it at scale and efficiency based on the resourcing that we had. But we had a lot of elements in our infrastructure that we liked. So a lot of times it's challenging. A lot of people want to come in and say, nope, this is only going to work if you blow out your infrastructure and you're going to replace it, everything, kit and caboodle with us. That was never going to work for us. And they understood that. They understood the ecosystem we were working in, where our data was, what we'd already done on the identity side, what we were already doing in conjunction with the NFL and that one-to-one fan engagement feed. And so they didn't try to replace it. They said, no, we're going to be additive. We're going to take what you've built and fill in the gaps. It added the functionality we needed. It can run in real time. We can push data back and forth. We can leave it in place. We have a lot of flexibility in terms of how we engage with the ecosystem, depending on the particular project. And it really focuses on what we want to do in terms of understanding the fan first and foremost. So that's a little bit on our journey. I've talked a little fast. I want to hand it back over here to Hillary to kind of wrap things up. So a little more time for Q&A than I expected, but hopefully I didn't talk too fast.
No, that's great. Thanks so much. I think, one of the things that struck me when Russ and I were talking about this story initially was that these problems, these kind of customer-centric problems are everywhere across all industries, and really stitching together that data to be able to really know your customer so that you really understand what's the right next treatment for them. How are you going to treat this customer differently than that customer and delight them, and then also add to the bottom line, right? I think that's an important factor. So when we were talking yesterday, it struck me that you guys are kind of doing Moneyball for fans, right? So you're doing this like intense kind of Moneyball analysis for fandom. A couple key takeaways, and then we'll open it up to some questions. I think looking at how you can maximize revenue, how can you maximize that upside while maximizing net promoter score or customer engagement, really empowering your users. You talked about a small but mighty team that you have that's really trying to understand the data, giving people access to all the data, democratizing that data, really important for business operations. Bringing in those advanced analytic capabilities, bringing in machine learning capabilities so that you can really up your game, you can up your game in terms of really understanding, how to bring advanced analytics to improve the outcomes. And then, finally sort of future-proofing yourself, really making sure that you've got a lot more that you are ambitious to go and get after, and so you're getting started in this direction, and you're delivering something I think that's been tremendously hard, which is getting analytics into operationalization and into scale. So we're excited about that. With that, please let us know if you have a couple questions. You can raise your hand. You ask your question. We'll read it out loud so people who are dialed in here. All right, thank you all so much. Thank you, Russell, for your time. This was great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Nice job. Yeah.